hello. Okay, wait, let's try again.
Good call.
Yep. Ready?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to tonight's session. My name is Andrea. I'm with Juris Education alongside Mika MacDonald, who will be introducing herself momentarily. So tonight's discussion is all about the LSAT. We're doing a free LSAT workshop, how to score 165 plus. So a couple of housekeeping rules, so to speak. First and foremost, this is the question that we always get, is will this webinar be recorded? Will we receive a recording? Yes, you absolutely will. Within a day or two, we'll have this in your inbox. So if you do need to pop out or if you want to review later on and add to your notes, we highly encourage that. In terms of how long we're looking at running tonight's webinar, really great question as well. Up to an hour. The majority of tonight's discussion will be speaking about the keys to a 165 plus. We'll be going over real LSAT questions, and then we love to leave a portion towards the end, as well as we do like a little mini check-in in sort of the middle for that Q&A. So we encourage you to use that chat function, put in your questions. We want to hear from you, whether that be about the LSAT or the admissions process as well. Mika's also an admissions counselor. Mika, I'll let you speak on that momentarily. So she has a lot of knowledge to share. Before I do that, I just want to take a quick moment to introduce who we are, because I know there's a ton of new faces in the room. So we're Juris Education. We're a globally recognized law school admissions consulting firm, offering comprehensive support from test prep to law school admissions and even bar exam tutoring. With a 94% acceptance rate, our students get into the top law schools in the United States. Last cycle alone, our T14 acceptance rate was 34%, which is almost 6 times higher than the national average of 5.7%. This is something we're incredibly proud of. Now, what do we believe in? Well, we believe in starting the law school application as early as possible, which is why we offer something called pre-law advising and profile development. Essentially, this focuses on building each student's professional cover letter and resume to highlight the most meaningful experiences. We also help candidates boost their academic transcripts and GPA, find stellar internships, and create a timeline for LSAT prep. We have one goal, and that's to get applicants into their dream law program. Now, we also offer private LSAT tutoring, which assesses each candidate's strengths and weaknesses. This helps create a custom study plan structured for the days, weeks, and months ahead. We tailor our approach to each student's unique needs and schedule, providing the right assessments and lessons as they become familiar with test content, strategies, and format. On average, we see a 12-point increase for 45 plus hours of tutoring, and we offer a 165 plus LSAT score guarantee with our 60-hour program. Once we've helped shape an outstanding candidate, we support in creating the perfect application. This guides the creation of a well-balanced list of target, safety, and reach schools. We also help build strong resumes and obtain letters of recommendation from the right recommenders. Our admissions counselors, who are also essay writing experts, will brainstorm, outline, and edit your supplemental essays and personal statements until they are perfect. Our goal is to build the most perfect candidate and application. We utilize every tool in our skill set to ensure the products we create with our students stand out from the rest. We're really excited to have you here, folks. We're excited to get through and get through this process, and we look forward to all your consultations. With that being said, though, I'd love to pass it over to my colleague Mika to introduce herself and get going with tonight's discussion.
Hey everyone, I'm Mika MacDonald. I am an LSAT tutor and admissions counselor here at Juris, and obviously a webinar host. I'm excited for today's presentation, how to score 165 plus. I think we've got a lot of good stuff to talk about today. Let me just tell you about myself. I took the LSAT twice in 2011, scoring a 172 and then a 179. I then attended the University of Chicago Law School, and after graduation, I clerked for a bankruptcy judge and then worked as a corporate restructuring litigator for about 5.5 years. I left the active practice of law during the pandemic and returned to teaching, which I've been doing full-time for about 3 years now. So with all of that said, you know a little bit about me, let's dive in. So what are the biggest keys to a 165 plus score? I'm going to give you the most obvious ones. So first and foremost, get better before you try to get faster. right? The LSAT is a very time-pressured exam, but putting yourself under time pressure when you are first starting out, when you're mastering the skill set, when you're understanding the question types and how they function, will not be helpful, right? So first and foremost, focus on learning and fundamentals before you focus on speed. This idea is something we're going to return to of thoughtful study. One of the things that you can do to thoughtfully study is keep a question journal. When you miss a question, you mark it down. You might do this in an Excel. You might do this by hand, however you prefer. But track your mistakes and think about the patterns. Think about the types of questions you're missing and what they might be sharing in common with each other, right? Really be thoughtful as you review and study. The second big piece here is work. Just work. I estimate that I put in about 150 to 200 hours before my first exam, and another 150 to 200 hours to get my 179, right? So this is not a study that you just show up and ace, or an exam that you can just show up and ace. This is an exam that really genuinely requires a lot of work if you want a top score. So keep that in mind. Second big thing is commit to a study schedule, right? Haphazard study is significantly less effective and less reliable. There's something to be said for making a weekly pattern. These 3 nights from 6:30 to 8:30, I will study the LSAT. Eventually, what that means is that when you start to study that night, your brain is primed for the LSAT. Your brain is expecting to study the LSAT. You are already in the zone, right? That is a big part of a reliable study schedule. It means that when you start studying, you are in the zone. You are not just randomly coming off of whatever. Finally, paced curricula. It is certainly possible to study for the LSAT pure self-study. There are plenty of resources out there that can help you do that. But why not follow a pre-built curriculum for the most part, one that is meant to cover everything on the exam step by step, right? You can get that through test prep websites, and you get that through your tutor, right? So really, really think about investing in a pre-built curriculum with someone that can help you along the way. Khan Academy is nice. Mike Kim's LSAT trainer is nice. But the people that use test prep and tutors do best, just as a general rule or a general observation. Okay, let's roll over. So let's talk about the LSAT more broadly before we dive too deep, right? The LSAT, I think most of you know this, is there are 4 sections on an actual LSAT exam. One of them is an experimental. It doesn't count. It's not scored. The 2 types of scored sections are logical reasoning and reading comp. On the real exam, 2 sections of logical reasoning are scored and 1 section of reading comp is scored. Logical reasoning has a lot of patterns, recurring patterns in terms of not just the question types themselves, but the way the prompt is built, the way the answers are structured, the type of argument being made. So the more you can notice and take into account these patterns, the better you are able to anticipate correct answers to questions. Ultimately, the goal of any self-study or any study leading up to 165 plus is exactly that. By the time you get to 165, you should be anticipating the correct answer the vast majority of the time on the exam. But you only get there by studying these structures and noticing these patterns. Same thing applies to traps. The LSAT is very deliberately designed. It is not just here are 5 answer choices. It's here are 5 answer choices. One of them is correct and has been disguised to seem as incorrect as possible or to be as difficult to read as possible. And here are 4 wrong answers, 2 of which sound very similar to the correct answer and are very hard to distinguish, and another of which is a very different type of tempting wrong answer. So the more you see the patterns and how they design traps, the better able you are to avoid those traps as you encounter them. So really be thoughtful, right, as you study. Really think about the patterns and the traps. Second point here, develop a systematic approach to the improvement of, I'm going to call them core skills, like active reading, being able to retranslate poorly written sentences mentally, right? Being able to identify what sort of argument is being made, being able to notice when the author is introducing the purpose behind something versus the effect of something versus the anticipated effect of something, right? All of these different skills exist and apply across question type. So the better you develop these skills, the better you'll be at all of the question types, not just one of them. Finally, right, I said thoughtful study at least twice already. I'm going to say it again here. Repeated practice and tweaks, right? Think about what you're doing. Think about what you're doing well. Think about what you're doing wrong. Think about dumb mistakes you're making, and maybe could a little highlighting prevent that mistake from ever occurring again, right? Think about whether you seem to struggle with causation-based arguments, conditional logic-based arguments, or comparison-based arguments. Think about these things as you review, tweak your approach, tweak your game day process, tweak your study process. But as long as you stay thoughtful and keep adjusting, you should be able to keep making progress. The times when people plateau tend to be the times when they don't know what else to do to keep improving, right? So as long as you keep thinking about what you could be doing better, hopefully you can avoid those plateaus. Yeah. Mastering logical reasoning. So like I said, this is 2 of the 3 scored sections on the LSAT. Ultimately, logical reasoning is about arguments and inferences, right? 2 big ideas. How do we make arguments, and what information can we infer from a set of information given to us? There's a debate about how many distinct question types there are on the LSAT, let's say 16 through 20. So about 16 through 20 question types. I tend to break these down into sort of 3 groupings, the 3 I's in my opinion. So one is identification. These questions are simply asking you to look at the prompt and identify something within it. So we have questions like main conclusion, i.e., what is the main conclusion? We have questions like, what is the role of this statement within the overall argument? Or what is the flaw being committed by the argument? In each of these cases, we're identifying something, right? These seem deceptively easy, but identification questions involve the most deliberate deception by the LSAT, right? That's the whole point. How can you make it difficult to identify the main conclusion of a 6-line argument? Seems like it would be difficult to do that, and yet there are 5-star difficulty main conclusion questions because they're just that good at making it difficult, right? So a lot of what goes into these is the fundamental skill set, right? And understanding how answer choices are written, right? How do I parse through the terrible language of the LSAT to find the answer I anticipated? The second set of questions is probably the biggest, most common set, right? Interaction questions. So we have things like strengthen an argument, weaken an argument. We have things like what assumption is necessary for this argument to work, or what assumption is sufficient to make this argument true, right? But ultimately, all of these question types are asking us not to identify things, to identify things, but along the way to interacting directly with the argument. So when people think of the LSAT, this is the grouping of questions they tend to think of most. Third group is inference type questions. So resolve the paradox, most strongly supported, etc. And these ones, we are given information, right? And we are asked to sort of infer in a resolve the paradox, we're given information that seems paradoxical, and we're asked to infer how could this happen in a reasonable way. Similarly, in a most strongly supported, we're given a series of information, a series of sentences giving us info, and we're asked what inference could be most strongly supported based on the info I was given. So here, we're making the argument, basically, right? We're being asked to find a conclusion that would either resolve the paradox or be strongly supported by information we're already given. The biggest thing to realize about this whole test is it's kind of deliberately written in formal legal language from the 1950s. They show no signs of moving away from that pattern either, which is annoying. But ultimately, this is written in weird, poorly written, outdated English, and that's on purpose, right? That is part of the inherent difficulty here. So you need to focus on broad skill buildings, right? Grammar skills, right? Understanding what a referent is and how to identify what it's referring to. Things like mentally translating poor English into modern English that's easier to comprehend. One of the things I point out to students is that they are doing this constantly throughout the exam. We all are when we're reading this material. We're retranslating it into better English. And so that is a skill that should be deliberately cultivated, right? It is so fundamental to the whole exam that you shouldn't just rely on passive practice. You should thoughtfully and directly cultivate that skill. All right, let's roll over. Reading comprehension. Reading comprehension, 27 questions, 35 minutes with 4 total passages. So you will get 4 short passages, 1 to 2 pages in length, and then you'll be asked 5 to 8 questions about each passage before the next one starts. There are 4 quote-unquote topic areas in reading comp: science, law, social sciences, and humanities. Ultimately, though, I tend to tell people that topic is not nearly as important as underlying structure is. I tend to identify about 8 different types of essay structures that the LSAT uses for all of these different reading comp passages. That tends to be in line with a lot of other people. Some people have 22, but they're making very fine-grained distinctions at that point that don't really seem worth it. But if you understand these structures and you can identify the structure that you're reading quickly, right? If you can get through the first paragraph and say, this is an old new passage, as in it's about the old approach to something, the new approach, and why there is a change. Very common in science passages, right? Old, new, right? Makes sense for science. So the second you can identify something like that, it really helps you read the rest of the essay. You have expectations now that are built in. There's a certain formula you're pretty certain they're going to follow. And that carries over to a lot of the questions on the LSAT. In contrast to reading comp on the SAT and ACT, yes, there is a huge jump in sort of difficulty of material, but there's also a big shift in focus. ACT, SAT tends to just focus on can you read and comprehend the information being presented. The LSAT asks, can you read and comprehend this information and understand why the author was doing the things they did, right? So it's not just what is the big picture here, although that is absolutely a question type we tend to call main point questions. But there are also questions like, why did the author use this particular wording in this particular part of the essay? Right? Or what did the author intend to convey by using this term in this part of the essay? Both different question types, but both really go to the author's thought process, their intent behind what they did. So when it comes to the LSAT, being able to see that essay structure also tells you a little bit about the author's intent. What was the goal here? Well, I'm in an old new passage. So the goal of the author was to tell me what the old approach was and why we changed the new approach and what the new approach is, right? And that really informs these big picture author intent type questions throughout the passage. You also have questions that are just straight detail ones. We would call them, I call them locate details. You have inference questions, right? Where we are going to try and make a new conclusion about something based on what was already given to us in the passage. We might even have inferences about what other people in the passage would think about something else in the passage that they weren't mentioned in relation to. So you might have a passage that's about a writer and the different schools of thought that she joined throughout her writing career. And then you might have a question that says, you know, what would school one think about this thing she did 25 years later, right? So we really, really have to think about all of the players involved in these passages too. These are called non-author opinion questions. Okay, let's get back to the points on the slide though. How do you excel in reading comp? Number one, it's active reading, and it's not just actively reading for content, it's actively reading for the author's intent, right? Number two, understand these essay structures, identify them quickly. They really help guide you as you get into the questions. I am a big note taker. There are plenty of people out there that just do active reading. There are plenty of people out there that do highlighting and active reading. But I do think that disciplined, quick, effective note-taking is the most powerful way to approach the exam. And my note-taking style is something that I explicitly teach to students because it's very easy to take too many notes, right? So there's a balancing act here, but I really do think that short, powerful notes are the best approach. Finally, if you do become a note taker, you can use your notes, and there is a built-in search box that will search the entire text of the passage. These sort of things really go to efficiency time-wise, right? Like I said earlier, this is 4 passages, 27 total questions, and 35 minutes. And people tend to take at least 3 to 6 minutes to read each passage. So you can imagine that there is a lot of time pressure when you're actually answering questions, because at least half of your time, or at least a third to a half of your time, gets used up in reading the passages themselves. So good notes can really accelerate your ability to find information and improve your memory retention the first time around. And the built-in search box, when used effectively, can be really helpful in discarding answers or finding support for certain answers. So those would be my 4 big things for excelling in reading comp. So steps to boost your score. 1, 2, 3. Number 1, analyze your results, right? Review them as they happen, and then hopefully you're using a test prep platform like LSAT Lab that lets you track all of the past questions you've done and see detailed analytics about them. Good analytics, I feel like at this point in the world, I don't need to say that that's obviously very powerful and can be very helpful when used well. It's definitely a tool for improvement that you should try to take advantage of. Yeah. Number 2. Active review methods. I already said question journals. Blind review journal is a similar idea that's used when you're taking practice tests to help you, I guess, identify the distinction between questions that you missed because you were under time pressure versus questions that you missed because you didn't have the skill set or misunderstood something. But active review methods are what leads to improvement. Taking test after test is not helpful. I had a student who did that, and I explicitly told them that that was the wrong approach, and they continued to do it, and they suffered as a result of it. You want to be thoughtful. Finally, right, assess your improvement, adjust your study plan. So for example, conditional logic is about 1/4 to 1/3 of the logical reasoning section. It's very esoteric. It's not something people typically learn in college unless you take like a philosophy of formal logic class. So if you can see in your analytics that you are starting to lag behind on conditional logic-based questions compared to everything else, make that adjustment, refocus your study goals, right? So again, having those analytics to look at and then think about what am I weakest on and need to improve on is very powerful. Okay, finally, building endurance for test day. Look, the real exam is exhausting. You get a 10-minute break, but otherwise it's 35 minutes, 10-minute break, 35 minutes, 35 minutes. That is a long time to be ultra focused mentally. Especially you're doing a very intense intellectual workout every time you study for the LSAT, and especially when you're taking it. So this is not a level of intensity that most people are used to, sustained intellectual intensity, which means you should practice it, right? The same way that, I assume like a boxer wouldn't go and just box having never done like a full sparring session that looks like a full boxing match, right? You should train this. Take full practice tests and take them under test day conditions as much as possible. So if you plan to take the test at a test center, right, go take in a coffee shop or a library, right? Give yourself a little bit of noise to deal with. If you're going to be taking comfortably, silently in your own home, try to recreate the test day conditions you'll have to follow as much as possible, right? But you need to do test practice to get used to the fatigue that will come from this. And the more you can mirror the real world test day conditions, the better these will be like a representation of what you'll score. And ultimately, nothing is a better indicator of what you'll score than the average of your last 5 practice tests. Just straight up, that's the best indicator. Well, I guess last 10 could extend too far back in time. So yeah, take a lot of practice tests. Don't kill yourself doing it. But I usually tell people to aim to have at least 15 by the time they take the real exam. Finally, this is an emotionally intense exam, right? It is ego challenging, right? It is incredibly stressful. There's a lot riding on it. It is very easy to lose our calm, both when we're practicing and studying, but also on test day. And I can tell you very clearly, very firmly, that it is better to take a few deep breaths, pause, get yourself centered, than it is to force yourself to keep working while you're tilted, okay? I had a student that was PTing in the high 160s, and she got a 138, which was crazy to me, insane. But she told me she just lost her cool on test day. Like from before the exam, something had already happened that day that really like messed with her. And then it just snowballed, right? And so that tells you can score 30 points below your PT average if you let your emotions snowball too much. So breathe, think about how to manage anxiety. This is a very core part of scoring a 165 plus. So final big key insights here. Number one, it is so tempting to focus on question types, right? To go, okay, I'm going to do strength and weaken today, and I'll practice it tomorrow, and then I'll do flaw the day after that, and then I'll practice it. But that's missing like the forest for the trees, right? This is not a bunch of discrete question types that have nothing to do with each other, right? All of these question types involve a set of overlapping skills. And it's by developing those skills that you truly break through and improve here, right? It's not by breaking through with a single question type. That doesn't tend to even really happen. There may be a certain question types, but strength and weaken necessary assumption are very, very similar to each other, right? And if you're bad at one, you're probably going to be bad at all three. And vice versa. If you're good at one, you'll probably be good at all three. And that's because it's the skill set that matters. Breaking the code. right? Again, I'll say the LSAT is deliberately poorly written. That is an intentional part of the difficulty curve, right? But the questions and answers are poorly written in fairly systematic ways, which means if you can navigate that system, if you can identify what they're doing and retranslate information quickly into modern English, that will make a huge difference. That is a huge way to make breakthroughs here, just by kind of getting better at the English language. All right, so what genuinely sets top scorers apart? I'll let the first one really speak for itself. No one scores a 179 naturally. Okay, I've been in the test prep industry now for 3 years. I have yet to meet another tutor who was like, yeah, I just kind of rolled up, did like 20 hours of study, and then got a 177. I've never heard that. Never. And if someone told you that, they're probably lying. So, time, commitment. You have to commit to this. If you want that 165 plus, if you want to go to the T14, you want to get a really big scholarship from somewhere, you really genuinely have to commit. Effective study, right? High quality materials and test prep, a regular study schedule, and most importantly, honestly, confronting your own mistakes without ego. I think one of the things that primed me well for the LSAT was the fact that I played chess competitively growing up. And so, quote unquote, losing at an intellectual competition didn't bother me because there's always next game, right? But a lot of people will get too tied into what's happening, right? The fact that you scored a 138 on your diagnostic does not make you dumb. I have had a student go from a 137 to a 177, okay? So your initial score does not define you. Your score a month in does not define you. I actually only started working with that person when they are in the high 150s, low 160s. They had been working for 6 months and had made 20 points of progress on their own through thoughtful study. So lose the ego, commit to a study schedule, commit to like really putting in the hours, and it is very achievable. And then the last one, emotional resilience, right? This is going to be trying. Big projects are always a bit trying. I'm sure many of you have had something similar to this where you plugged in 100, 200, 300 plus hours. Burnout is real. The ego challenge is real. The time consumption is real. But if you want to go to law school, you want to get at 165 plus, get those big scholarships, right? Commit and figure out a way of becoming emotionally resilient about things like this. And believe me, that will only serve you well as a law student and as a lawyer, because the intensity probably honestly just keeps ratcheting up higher and higher from here. So 165 plus is not easy to achieve, but it is achievable. And it's achievable for, I would say, basically everyone watching this. It is a matter of good study and commitment. That's what got me to a 179. It wasn't just being smart. It was I put in the work. And if you do it too, you'll get there. Yeah. All right, let's roll into the break.
So just to our audience at home, I want to take a really quick moment to go over some of these questions in the chat. Mika, I hope you're seeing all the love on the screen.
I am.
How do I do? Somebody's asking how to get Mika as a tutor. Really great question. Okay, so let me draw your attention to the screen. If you take out your phones, you scan that QR code, it actually takes you back to a it takes you back to a landing page where you're able to book a one-on-one consultation, speak to one of my awesome colleagues about what you're looking for. Mention that there's a 10 off web discount code, and that actually gives you 10% off any one of our wonderful programs, and it gives you the ability to learn from us. Thanks, you're very welcome. Awesome. This is what we're here for, right? So I want to make sure that I throw that out there. We have that discount code available. There's a question in here, Leandra. I saw it. I won't forget. This was the very first question asked, and I think it's extremely relevant to tonight's conversation. So this individual does not plan to take the LSAT until 2026, but they would like to use the year to study. So I think this is the perfect time to get going. Would they use material from this year, 2025, or material from 2026? They need some guidance with what kind of material they need.
Yeah. You're fine. They do release recent prep tests, usually 1 or 2 per year, but all of like the past 15, 20 years of prep tests still valid. The questions, the reading comp, still basically the same thing. So yeah, you can dive in right now or dive in next year using this year's material. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Awesome. There's another question. Do you provide consulting on just the law school application aside from LSAT tutoring? Yes, that's actually something we do as well. So we were on the admission side of things as well as the LSAT, and Mika is on both sides of that, which is wonderful. Mika, there was a question in here, and let me just find it real quick. I think it was, how many practice tests do you recommend before taking the real one?
Ooh, that's a good question. My honest answer would probably be at least 25 to 30, preferably even more. But I think having gone in with 15 is doable. The thing is, it kind of depends because practice questions are drawn from older practice tests. So you could do a ton of drilling and end up doing 50 practice tests worth of material, even though you only took 15 full-length practice tests. So I really do just say the hours commitment is what matters most in terms of the studying, not the number of tests, but just 150 to 200 hours. And then I would say at least 15. Yeah, at least 15.
Awesome. I love this question. Why do you think it's a better idea to take the test at a center?
So when you take it remotely, it is proctored, which means there is somebody that is just going to be watching you the whole time. That somebody is, getting paid $15 an hour. They have no particular training. They have a list of things that you're not allowed to do. And if they hit a button, your test gets canceled. Just that whole sitting is done. All the time you spent studying for that test, now you got to wait another month and a half. And you might even have to pay to take it the second time, even though you were unjustly buzzed out the first time. There's just risk associated with taking it from home that taking it at a test center does not involve. So that would be like my big thing. It's just, also, you don't have to bring your own tech to the test center. They have their own devices. Everything is handled there. There's just very, very low risk to you if you go and take it at the test center. Yeah, I've had students, had their experience ruined because of bad proctoring, unfortunately.
Very unfortunate.
Very.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to do one more question, and then we can go into the actual practice questions. I just want to point out, there's a couple of students asking about, it looks like they're full-time, they're working 40 plus hours and they're only free on weekends and study schedules. Mika here actually did a webinar all about this last week about being a non-traditional applicant. And we talk about basically everything under the sun that has to do with being a non-traditional applicant who is applying to law school. And we do touch on the LSAT quite a bit. So I definitely recommend checking that out. There's one more question in here. I apologize, it got lost in the chat. Some really great discussions. Oh gosh, I can't even keep up with the questions. How many times are people allowed to take the LSAT?
I think it is now 6 times over a 5-year period. It's a little bit weird, but you do have lots of opportunities. I would say most of the people I've worked with as both a tutor and as an admissions coach have taken it twice. People tend to take it once. They feel like, I was nervous, I was anxious, I scored a few points below my expected, and I do think I can get better. They study, they take it a second time, and that's the score they're happy with.
Amazing. Someone said would love to catch last week's webinar. Really great question. It's on YouTube, folks. It's on YouTube. Yeah. You'll be able to review.
This one too will be on YouTube, I think.
This
right?
one, yes, this too will be on YouTube. Mika, okay. I will pass it over to you to get going with some of the real LSAT questions.
Great. So this is always a fun part for me because I do actually really enjoy teaching. So we've got 3 questions: a weekend, a paradox, and a most strongly supported. In the weekend question, our author is going to make an argument, and we're going to choose the answer that would most weaken the author's argument. In the paradox, they're going to lay out sort of a set of facts with a very surprising outcome or contrast. Here, it's going to be an outcome-based one. And then we're going to choose what we think best resolves the paradox, right? Makes things sensical. And then, most strongly supported, we're given a series of statements, and we're asked to draw an inference from them, right? So we're basically almost making an argument here. We're saying this is the most reasonable conclusion that you could draw from this set of information. So let's dive in. All right. I like to read out loud, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then we'll take a little pause. People can think, put your answers in chat if you'd like, and then we'll go over it. So we have an art historian who says, a recent excavation uncovered a marble bust of Pope Leo IX that my colleague has attributed to Michelangelo. He argues that the proportion of the bust, its distinctive gaze, and the Calicata marble from which it was crafted are all trademarks of Michelangelo. I agree that these features or factors are all typical of Michelangelo's work, but are equally applicable to Raphael's early period. Moreover, the excavation took place in a region that Michelangelo is not known to have visited. Therefore, the bust should be attributed to Raphael. Okay. So what I will immediately say is I think of this as having a sort of argument structure called a plan or recommendation. The conclusion here, last sentence, therefore the bust should be attributed to Raphael, right? That's indicative of this sort of recommendation structure. So our author is recommending one thing over a potential other thing. All right, let's take like, I don't know, 2.5 minutes, take a chance to read, think, submit answers in chat, and then we'll come back to it.
Mika, in the meantime, can I just ask you for a one quick response? There's an individual here, and I think I have to shout out this person. Do you think they asked you, they're 43 years old, and they asked if they're too old for studying or law school?
I don't think so. And in fact, I co-clerked with a guy who was in his 3rd career and was, I think when I met him, 51. And he is now, is he still at Gibson Dunn? Anyways, he's a junior partner, I think, at Gibson Dunn in New York. So I don't think that's too late at all. He started law school in his late 40s, and you know, he was working at one of the biggest law firms in the U.S. a few years later. When I say Gibson Dunn, that's like a big firm. So I don't think that his age interfered at all. If anything, it may have actually helped him, right? Because he was a bit more work experienced, a bit more settled in life, a bit more reliable maybe. So I don't think it'll hurt you. Really, I genuinely don't. Yeah.
Thank you. I had to shout out that person, and there's a ton of really great
Yeah.
conversations happening. People are supporting one another and sharing their ages and their experiences. But I will let you get back
Yeah.
to logical reasoning.
All right. So I saw mostly people jumping onto the right answer here. So I will say it is B, right? So this is a type of, I guess, issue in an argument called assumes a difference, right? You notice how the author here, our art historian, right, says, okay, these things and cut either way. But this thing definitely doesn't cut Michelangelo's way, therefore we should choose Raphael. But he never actually specified whether that feature, which is where the excavation, that region, cut in Raphael's favor either. It was just total silence. The author seemingly assumed that because Michelangelo didn't fit, it must be the case that Raphael fit. And so B is just calling out that mistaken assumption directly, right? Well, what if that region was never visited by Raphael either? Now your evidence is meaningless. So this was a recommendation type argument. It had this already existing flaw, this assumed difference. And our answer choice calls out that flaw, that flawed assumption, and turns it on its head. So this gets to a point I like to make about weakened arguments, which is what we really did here was just point out an existing weakness in an aggressive way, right? This argument was flawed from the get-go. And our answer wasn't really so much weakening as pointing out the obvious flaw. So when you're doing strengthen and weaken questions on the LSAT, many of them have existing flaws, and the answer choice basically just hammers that existing flaw home. Those tend to be actually the lower difficulty ones. It's much more difficult to strengthen or weaken an actually good argument, right? You have to be a bit more creative about it. But that was fantastic, everybody. This is a really good one. Let's roll over. Paradox question. So our question stem is, which of the following best explains the paradoxical situation described above? And our paradox here is American Motor Company prioritizes vehicle performance over safety, and as a result, produces vehicles that consistently rank as the least safe to operate in the event of a collision. Despite this, American Motor Company vehicle owners are far less likely than the average driver to be involved in a collision resulting in injury. So this is a classic surprising outcome paradox. All of the data would suggest a very different outcome than the one we're seeing in reality. So what we're probably looking here is a good cause. What else would cause these vehicle owners to be safer, right? We need a different reason. We need a new reason that would explain this very surprising outcome. So take a look and we'll dive back in. And if Andrea has questions that I want to answer or that she wants me to answer, we can do that too.
No questions as of right now. I think people are really enjoying this. I don't want to throw you off your track.
Right. All right. I love that someone's saying this is fun because I actually do kind of find this fun. That's why I do it for a living. It's inherently fun to answer these. Oh, swoop. All right. We've got a ton of answers. It's going to be like 30 more seconds. I don't want to rush people. All right. Yeah, I think everybody's pretty on point. A little bit tougher than the last question, I think, but it is D, right? So we're looking for that causation, which means we want something that could like very directly affect how safe people drive. So if we look at an answer like A, these are accessible, extremely expensive, and accessible. That doesn't directly speak to safety, right? We'd have to make an extra leap of intuition and say that that small portion, whoever they are also safe drivers. So A doesn't directly give us causation the way D does, right? D is just very, very straightforward. People who like high performance cars are also very highly skilled. That would explain maybe why they don't get into crashes, right? There's a very clear connection. Look at other answers. B, I heard a fair bit, and C, I heard a fair bit. With B, right, the driver's knowledge, right, whether they're aware or not, still doesn't seemingly explain why American Motor Company vehicle owners are so safe specifically, right? Because we're looking for something that gets us that specifically why these group of owners would be safe. So B is like a little what we call overly broad. C is the same thing, right? It still doesn't explain, it's relevant, right? All of these answers, for the most part, feel relevant to what's going on. And that's a huge part of the LSAT temptation. Most of the answers feel very on point or relevant to the argument, but we want to explain this as clearly as possible, and C is just too broad for that. It's not telling us about these group of vehicle owners. And then E, just that one is probably the one that's least on point, because why does the performance comparison against a rival explain the safety of the drivers at all? But great job, everyone. I would say paradox questions are my favorite. I like these little like brain teasers where you're just trying to, how would that be possible? Why would it turn out that way? I don't know. There's like a little bit of a detective work that's fun there. All right. Last one. Which one of the following is most strongly supported by the information above? I don't like these questions, actually. These might be my least favorite type of question. Inference questions feel a little bit unpredictable. You're also not always given relevant information, right? They might give you 7 lines of info, but the inference only involves 4 of them. So there's always this question here of like, what info combines with what other info in a way that I can use. All right, so let's read it. In recent years, scientists discovered 2 variations of an avian virus. Version 1A of the virus targets the central nervous system, while version 1B primarily targets the circulatory system. Recently, a vaccine has been developed that immunizes patients to both versions of the virus, while a previous vaccine immunized patients only to version 1B of the virus. All right. So there's this interesting, go ahead and read, take your time, think about it. I'm going to pontificate while we keep going. There's this interesting thing on the LSAT we would call like strength of language in answers, right? So you might have, well, in answers and in conclusions. So think about the difference between saying you might be wrong, you probably are wrong, and you are definitely wrong, right? So we have this idea of like certainty, levels of certainty. Questions like most strongly supported, we're making an inference based on very limited data, right? We get 5 lines of text here. So we like answer choices that are weakly worded, answer choices that don't say always, answer choices that don't say only, right? Things like that are harder to support and therefore more likely to be wrong. So an answer that is very soft, permissive, this is possible, this is maybe going to happen, That's the sort of thing we like in a most strongly supported. In contrast, in like a strength and weaken, we want something powerful and aggressive. So we want really strong wording. Just one of those things that the LSAT forces you to think about, right? But I'm looking at these answer choices. I'm seeing a lot of great answer choices. And yeah, it is ending up C this time. So I saw a lot of people choosing D as well, and that's a perfect like example of this. D says that people who receive the new vaccine will not suffer from virus-related health issues. Zero uncertainty, very intense, and from virus-related health issues, very broad, not this avian virus, virus-related health issues. So D has too strong and too broad of language, right? In contrast, C is very specifically saying issues resulting from the avian virus, right? It's not capturing anything beyond this one virus. And we have that very soft language, may now be protected. It's not even claiming that they are protected, right? It's just saying that they might now be protected. It's possible that they're protected, right? Very soft, very easy language. Really, really great and a most strongly supported. Let's see. With A, another tempting answer. The problem is we don't know how many people this virus actually affected at any point in time. So when A says many people developed these issues, I don't know if many people did. It might be that only like 2 people have ever been affected by this virus. I don't know. So A sort of implies additional knowledge we don't have. B just doesn't feel supported at all. It doesn't kind of directly follow. And E, anyway, it's pure knowledge, right? Yeah, E is more broad again about any vaccine, but we were only talking again about this one avian flu and the new vaccine that treats both versions. Yeah. So those are our 3 question types, right? We had weekend, paradox, most strongly supported. I think y'all did fantastic. So, yeah. Right. Andrea, what are we doing now? Questions? Cool. My bad. You got it.
No problem.
Oh, that's right. We had one more slide. Sorry, I totally forgot there was one more.
Totally okay. Totally okay.
So yeah, final thoughts, y'all. Consistent effort is going to be the one I'm going to just keep highlighting. If you are consistently studying and working and you're thoughtful about how you're doing it, you will improve. Really, really try and think about how you can actively study, right? Don't just follow a course. Don't just read one book. Think about all the things you can do. Build flashcards, right? Drill questions, do single practice sections, do whole practice sets. Really think about what you're doing. High quality materials. Again, I will point out that I'm a tutor. I think very highly of our tutoring work here. Use real questions from real tests at bare minimum. You can buy paper copies of the old exams from LSAC directly. That's the Law School Admissions Council. As far as test prep websites go, I will again say I use LSAT Lab, but there are dozen out there that all have an equal claim to being useful. And finally, right, trust that you will get better, right? It's going to be a frustrating process at times. The start might be rough. You might plateau for a little while, but if you keep working through it, right, if you keep being thoughtful about the ways you're studying, you will find ways to keep breaking through and improving. I can guarantee it. Yeah. I think that's it from me.
Yeah. Yes. So I would love a favor from our audience. We want to hear from you. So if you take out your phones, I know everyone has their phones nearby, scan that QR code. And basically what that does is it takes you back to a really quick feedback form. I promise you, it's only a few questions. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you loved about this webinar, if there's anything that you think we could improve on. We really do take this feedback seriously. And what we do with it is we just look to improve every single one of our future sessions. That's another great webinar. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you everyone for the kind words. Make sure you put that in the feedback form. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, one quick second. Yes, there's one-on-one sessions, Rosemary. So somebody had asked, before I go, are these sessions one-on-one? Yes, they are. There's a ton of yes, this was recorded. There's a ton of really great questions happening. I unfortunately cannot keep up. We are over time, but Mika, do you have a minute or two?
Yeah, Alex? I can answer one or two more questions.
Awesome. Alan, so if you book that one-on-one, like a consultation, it's sort of just part of our process, one of my awesome colleagues can talk to you about payment and how that works. Okay, so this is a really great question. And I think it incorporates aspects of what we do on both ends. So somebody's asking, how long before the law school application do we have to have our LSATs? Does the test result expire?
Results do eventually expire. I think it's either the 5-year period or the 7-year period. They may have changed it. But it is strongly suggested that you have your final LSAT score when you're applying. It is totally possible, however, to take it, apply, and do a retake, and then submit the updated score to schools. Plenty of people do that every year. They write like a little addendum to explain that they'd like schools to wait for the new score to come in. So that totally works, not a problem. Yeah.
So there's a question asking about where these practice questions came from. Mika, you used the link I sent, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so awesome. That's from one of the practice tests you built, or we built, right?
Yes, exactly. So I just put it in the chat. I'm going to pin it for everyone. I just needed to clarify with Mika before I sent that over. It's a full-length practice test. It has a ton of really great questions in there. Highly recommend you download it. Really good study resource.
Great study material. Great study material. Yeah, for everybody who's totally new, download it and you can try it out, see the different question types. It's a great way to, dip your toes in.
And that was a really great segue, because the question I was about to ask was, there's a question in here about somebody who's completely new and where to begin with their LSAT prep.
Yeah. So I think our website has a lot of great resources, including like a basic guide to the sections, how the LSAT is structured, everything. The other big place I would say is the Law School Admissions Council, LSAC. So if you go to lsac.org, those are the people that administer the LSAT, do all the grading, et cetera. So they have a huge setup there. You specifically want to get set up on what's called Law Hub. That's the place. It has some free test materials, like a few free previous practice tests from LSAC, and a whole bunch of info about everything else. So I would say LSAC, LSAC, and Law Hub. Those are the two things to go Googling for, and check out our website for all of the basic resources that we've got there.
Awesome. So somebody asked about the feedback form, so I just put a link in the chat. Didi, she says that she filled out a feedback form and never heard back from anyone. Didi, we may not have reached out to you directly, but we take all of that feedback to our team internally and we work on that. So we definitely do. Mika, I know we're over time. Any last minute thoughts, anything before we let these kind folks go?
I think a 165 plus is a lot more achievable than people think. It's just the level of commitment that it takes can surprise people. But I know that everyone out there, if you put in those hours and you study thoughtfully, it's possible. 100%. I have yet to see it not be possible for a student. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Mika. Thank you to our audience for spending the last hour with us. I think that's a beautiful spot to end tonight's webinar. It is possible. Again, if you had questions and we weren't able to get back to them, please, we recommend booking that free consultation or just shooting us an email. Mika, you're getting lots of love. I hope you see that.
I can see it.
There's hearts and claps all across the board. Thumbs up. Thank you everyone for joining us. Best of luck on your LSATs. We're here to support you along the way, and I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. This is our last webinar for the year, so we'll see you back in January.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone. Take care.